Thanks for tuning in, Reality Sandwich viewers. Kyle Rosner here, and one of the conscious agents at Reality Sandwich, joined today by the wonderful Trish Mock. Trish, pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, we're excited to dive deeper, I think, into the wonderful plant medicine world of Kanna. You recently launched a brand focused around this particular plant medicine. So I'd love to explore with you your experience with the herb. Were you always into plant medicines? How did you discover this particular experience?
Yeah, well, for a little bit of context, my mom is an herbalist by trade. She runs a medicinal herb farm, which I've most recently relocated to here in upstate New York. And so I've always been somewhat familiar with many medicinal plants and herbs, but the one that I'm speaking about today, Kanna, was actually introduced to me just a couple of years ago. So for a little bit of background, I'm the founder of an immersive care company called Good Psyche, and we use medicinal plants and fungi to address your entire well-being inside and out. And the reason I bring that up is that Kanna, through my experience that I'm going to share, ended up being one of the hero ingredients of the products that we launched this past March during South by Southwest. So I can kind of jump right into
Yeah, what a place to launch, right at the epicenter of forward thinking, creativity, art, and what was it, just the right timing, or was that intentional that you wanted to have a presence there?
It was intentional. I was really pushing to be ready to launch for South by 2024. So it had been a goal for, a year and a half during product development to be ready for that week. And it was certainly a push coming down to the wire, but we made it, and we held an incredible launch event and had a panel of speakers on sex, psychedelics, and empathy. And empathy is going to be a theme that you hear today when I share my story with Kanna. So it kind of all ties in for sure. But yeah, I was introduced to Kanna after a very long and winding path with psychedelics and also with Western psychiatric medicine. So my story with plant medicine and psychedelics began around 2017. I had been diagnosed with bipolar 2 at the time and had started taking psychiatric medications to help manage that. So like mood stabilizers and things like that. So at the time I was feeling better. I was feeling like hopeful, but I still experienced depressive bouts of kind of self-isolation and sort of antisocial behavior. And that's when I discovered psychedelics. So I dove straight into microdosing LSD at the time, loved it. I would take a social sliver, so to speak, and feel very like bubbly and creative. I could feel my brain really like expanding and having these transformative moments of neuroplasticity. I stopped drinking alcohol around that same time, started experimenting with psilocybin, had a lot of wonderful experiences on mushrooms, despite the fact that they are a contraindication for lithium. But I never had any really negative side effects or anything like that. I was using MDMA recreationally at the time, another wonderful empathogen. But starting in 2021, I started having some negative experiences with those substances. In 2021, I had an experience with LSD that kind of put me off of it completely. I still haven't touched it since. And LSD can provide amazing experiences, like fun and whimsical, all the way to super deep and meaningful. But I think anyone that's experimented with LSD at least a few times has probably had an experience or two that scared the shit out of them. And that happened to me. Psilocybin had started to consistently hurt my stomach and make me very anxious, which I hadn't experienced with it up until that point. And then I had a trip with MDMA that really freaked me out. And it, like, at a soul level, my body just said, nope, never again. That's done. So I wasn't taking anything but herbs for a while. I had my go-tos. I had rhodiola, ashwagandha, lemon balm, all very like nervous system regulating, mood enhancing herbs, and they're great. But I hadn't really found a what I call vice replacement or anti-vice, something that made me feel sociable and outgoing, but wouldn't leave me hungover or depleted, right? So, what was that thing that was like gentle, brain friendly, isn't going to negatively impact your mindset or ruin your next day, etc.? So, at that point, I was in the very early stages of research for developing my first product for Good Psyche. And out of the blue, two people who were close to me in my life, one was a friend and former coworker, the other was my sister, reach out to me separately, just completely by chance, within a week of each other, reached out to me suggesting that I look at this plant called Kanna. So I immediately ordered it, wanted to try it for myself. I ordered it from this brand called Zembrin, who were actually the first to pharmaceuticalize Scaletium tortuosum, which is the botanical name for Kanna. Zembrin had conducted some fMRI studies on the effects of Kanna on the amygdala in your brain and found that it behaves as an antidepressant. It behaves as an aid for people recovering from addiction. It's an anxiolytic, so it reduces anxiety. And turns out Kanna is a pretty fascinating little plant. So for some context about the plant, it's a succulent. It is native to the Karoo region of South Africa, and this isn't new. So I discovered it just a few years ago, but this plant has been used for millennia by some of the oldest civilizations on Earth, the San and the Khoi tribes of South Africa, and they integrated it into every aspect of their lives because it provides so many amazing benefits, which I was soon to learn. Categorically speaking, Kanna is an empathogen. It's a heart opener. It operates as body, mind, and soul medicine. And in being an empathogen, it can create feelings of oneness, connection, love, as well as things like presence and, of course, empathy. So it's super expansive. It makes you start to see like solutions and possibilities. And then it also has these amazing physical benefits. So it can increase stamina. It can reduce pain in the body. And so I'm reading all of this thinking, holy shit, this is exactly what I've been looking for. And not just me, I think it's what everyone is looking for. Not to mention that it is safe, it's legal, it's non-toxic, and it's non-habit forming. You can't get addicted to it. You can't form a dependency on it. So I started using it in the form of Zembrin, which is a little capsule. I believe there are 25 or 50 milligrams each. I think I was taking about 50 milligrams a day. And my experience with it wasn't so much like a one-hit wonder. You know, some people go and do ayahuasca and maybe it's a multi-day experience, but they do it once. It's like this transformative journey, and then they come back and integrate back into real life. Kanna is a little bit different. Kanna can certainly be taken at higher doses for kind of like a one-time experience, transformative experience, but it is very easy to integrate into your daily life. And so that's what I did. So this was much more of a incremental change in my cognition, in my mindset, in my energy. And Kanna is very pro-social. So one of the first things that I noticed with it is that I started feeling more compelled to go out and socialize. Having, I don't drink, I wasn't using anything else. And I'm not necessarily someone who suffers too much from social anxiety, but I think like most people, when you go out, it is nice to have a little aid just to make you feel a bit more bubbly, sociable, conversational. And Kanna being a heart-opening medicine and empathogen categorically, it elicits very pro-social behavior. So it does make you feel more bubbly, more conversational, makes it easier to connect with other people. And those are some of the things that I started to notice about it. And I thought, this is great. This is amazing. I don't have a hangover. My brain doesn't feel exhausted the next day. I can take this sustainably without much issue. So I think one thing that had always rubbed me a little bit the wrong way about other substances like alcohol or MDMA that I didn't find with Kanna is that people like to say, oh, it brings out your true self. It lets your guard down. When you drink or when you take MDMA, you can really connect with other people. And that can be true. But I think they can also both tend to take it too far in the way of letting your guard down or losing inhibitions that can almost make those connections inauthentic, And I think with Kanna, you don't get that sense of inauthenticity. When I used to take MDMA, I'd meet people out, right? And you're like, yes, we're connecting. We're getting along so well. Like, maybe we're going to be friends forever. And they were so amazing. And then you come down and realize, like, oh, maybe that was a little bit of a mirage or a little bit of an exaggeration. Maybe I wasn't as connected to that person as the substance led me to believe I was. So they tend to take it to that extreme. And with Kanna, my experience was much more grounded and grounding. And don't get me wrong, I think MDMA is an amazing compound. It can have life-saving, life-enhancing benefits when used in the right context. But Kanna is far safer and easier to take on a regular basis without any harmful side effects. So the other thing that I noticed from my experience taking Kanna was that I consider myself to be a pretty high functioning person, right? At the time that I discovered it, I was still in the corporate world while I was building my company. So I, like most people, had to show up on Mondays sharp as a whip and ready to power through the demands of the week. I didn't have the space in my schedule to feel incapacitated in any way. And so Kanna creates this beautiful sensation of, you're both focused, you're also expansive. Really interesting juxtaposition with Kanna. It has that ability to kind of regulate your nervous system and direct your energy in a focused way while elevating your energy in an expansive way. I don't really know of anything else that does that the way that Kanna does that. Really, really interesting side effect.
What's been your ritual in terms of, using Kanna to optimize your mood state and workflow versus, when you need it for social experiences and internally regulating?
Yeah. So for cognitive function and mood regulation, I typically take it once a day in the morning while I have my coffee, because I find that it helps my caffeine high be less methy and spiky and much more of an even and sustained energy. So I take it in the morning with that. And the interesting thing about Kanna too is you may only feel the effects of it. Like I only feel the effects of it for maybe 2 hours after I take a dose. But it continues to work on you even after you finish feeling those direct effects. It's neurogenerative, and it has alkaloids in it that help it to act as an SSRI, or an antidepressant. So it's a serotonin releasing agent, and therefore it does continue to work even after you finish feeling the effects. So that's how I use it, just on like a daily cognitive health perspective. When I'm wanting to use it more as an anti-vice or a vice replacement, I typically double or triple my dose, which if I'm using my own product, that means taking like 10 to 12 sprays, because it's a mouth spray. If you're taking something like Zembrin, I personally wouldn't take more than 200 milligrams of that per day. I think their normal dose is around 25. So 200 milligrams and going out to do any sort of social activity for me was like perfect. It just really made me feel very uplifted and confident, and I could kind of go into any conversation or social setting feeling this, I call it a quiet confidence, because again, it doesn't make you feel, there's no amphetamines in it. And that's one of the major differences between Kanna and something like MDMA, which is also an empathogen, is that it's missing those amphetamines. So there's nothing that makes you feel kind of jittery, which is really nice. That's why I say I take it with coffee on a daily basis, because it actually quells those jitters. So that's how I integrate it into my life in those two contexts.
I'm curious, your thoughts on the intersection of the pharmaceutical industry maybe entering this psychedelic realm. And, you're a prime example of us being able to get around the pharmaceutical industry and go back to these traditional herbs and these traditional medicines we've sort of lost in our psyche.
Yeah, I consider this kind of surge in interest in Kanna in the West to be a symptom of a couple of things. One, of course, is the mental health crisis that we're all keenly aware of. People seem to be desperate to find solutions that are safe, that don't come with a laundry list of negative side effects that you hear on pharmaceutical TV commercials. It's almost comical at this point when you hear them rattle off all of those side effects, because you're like, oh my God, like these sound horrible. How is this even legal to distribute this medication? And I don't knock pharmaceuticals. I mean, I still take them for what I need them for, and they do serve me and they serve a lot of people. And so I think it has its place. But I think people are looking for more organic, natural solutions that are easier to integrate into their life and that play nicely with other things. I think that's one of the beautiful things about Kanna too, is it plays nicely with so many other substances. You can stack it with psilocybin microdosing. You can stack it with THC. You can take it with there are really no contraindications for Kanna, except for if you are on SSRIs. They do recommend that you speak with a doctor, just because Kanna also acts as an SSRI, and you don't want to flood your brain with too much serotonin, right? But other than that, it is extremely safe. I think that when it comes to pharma getting involved in psychedelics and this space, I'm very torn on it. On the one hand, I appreciate that the involvement of pharmaceutical companies brings with it the funding to do clinical studies and clinical trials, which I think are important. They do certainly play a role in understanding these substances better. It also can improve accessibility in certain ways. So people who formerly were not able to get their hands on psychedelics, in a clinical trial, maybe they're able to access them in a safe, controlled way. Of course, we also have the benefit of it becoming more acceptable in treating some of our most desperate populations. And I say desperate in the way of like underserved. So people who have suffered for a very long time have not been able to treat them properly. People with treatment-resistant depression, people with complex PTSD. I think the involvement of pharma has allowed them to get treatment for those things in a legal setting. If you're in the military, you couldn't go out and be taking psychedelics on your own. But veterans who are suffering from complex PTSD, being able to get access to psilocybin or MDMA therapy, I mean, that's amazing progress. Now, on the other hand, their involvement also means that they can start to price control these substances, which I think becomes very dangerous. We've seen how that goes with other medications. I believe it was a heart medication that they drove the price up so exorbitantly that people who desperately needed this heart medication couldn't afford it. And I would hate to see that sort of thing happen with psychedelics, because then the accessibility factor goes right out the window. The other thing that does worry me a little bit is that they're starting to take psychedelics out of their traditional contexts. And I think context, as you know, set and setting and the origins of these plant medicines or compounds is extremely important in how you end up experiencing them. So if you start to synthesize everything in a lab, it's not the same. It's not the same as something that grows out of the ground organically. And it's not the same setting as they were originally intended and used, which is in very, traditional indigenous settings, being very conscientious, being very intentional about how you consume them and why you're consuming them, and the integration, right? So how you integrate these learnings and these things back into your everyday life outside of this one experience or this limited series of treatments with these medicines. So it's a very complex issue. Very long-winded answer to your question, but it is an extremely complex topic, and I have very mixed feelings about it. And I think the only thing that we can do is sort of, from someone sitting in the psychedelic adjacent space, I feel it's my responsibility to continue to educate myself and relay education and information to our customers and to our curious humans and people that take an interest in this kind of thing, so that people can make their own decisions about this stuff and come to their own conclusions.
Beautifully put, and that's the importance of platforms like Reality Sandwich and some of the others, in the psychedelic plant medicine media space here. These are the stories we need to elevate and get these people the right information about making an informed decision about their health.
Yep, exactly, exactly.
Curious, I'd love to hear more about the feedback you've gotten when you reapproach your doctors and your family and people in the medical space saying, "Hey, I've gotten off of these, pharmaceutical medications, and now, I'm doing more traditional plant." What was the reaction or feedback you first got when wanting to introduce the medical community to your new programming?
Yeah, well, first off, I can say I had looped them into my microdosing practices with psychedelics back when I was using those. And there was, at the time, this was again like 2017, a lot of hesitation from the Western medical community around integrating psychedelics for my mental health. That has since evolved, I would say. I think a lot more psychiatrists and psychologists are opening up to the idea that perhaps there's something to these medicines and that they can play a very important role in your mental and emotional health. The issue I ran into the most with the herbal track and medicinal plant track was that Western educated physicians are not educated on medicinal plants and herbs. They're just not. They don't know anything about them. Every once in a while, you'll come across like a homeopathic doctor who's also an MD, or someone who's trained more in traditional medicine. But it's very hard to find in psychiatry. So it's been a very interesting journey to try to find a psychiatrist, and I have yet to find this, by the way, to find a psychiatrist who can prescribe pharmaceuticals, who also understands the benefits of and is informed about medicinal plants and herbs. If anyone knows of one, please let me know. I would love to meet them, but very, very hard to find. And so I've been met with a lot of resistance and a lot of fear around, oh, are you sure you want to do that? My goal would be to exist without any pharmaceuticals and purely use medicinal plants and herbs to sustain my mental and emotional health and my physical health for that matter. I'm not quite there yet. And I think it's going to take finding the right combination of multiple practitioners who together can use their education to help with an off-ramp plan. So I think it's really challenging, and my heart goes out to people who are in a similar boat as me, that they just want to be able to move to a completely organic, natural regimen, and are really having trouble finding the right coaching and doctoring to get there. So it's a work in progress. I'll have to keep you updated on that one.
I think another part of the psychedelic zeitgeist out there, and what a lot of people are interested in, is how to, quote, like, join the industry. So I'm curious to hear more about your experience from being in corporate America, and then, having your personal health experience impact your decision to, I need to make the leap and be an entrepreneur and start up my own company and brand here.
Yes. Well, first of all, I will say entrepreneurship is not for everyone. It is extremely difficult. You have very high highs and very low lows. And I don't say that lightly. So it was a huge decision for me to leave the golden handcuffs of corporate America. I worked very unhappily and was very unfulfilled, but I worked in tech for 12 years before I left. And it got to a point where I felt like I was not living my life. I felt like I was living somebody else's life. I had slipped through the cracks. And I would just be sitting at my computer staring at, some, in my mind, futile, pointless deck that I had to put together for something, and just thought, this is not my life. This can't be my life. Like, I'm not, this isn't me. And it's not a matter of being ungrateful or above it. It's just a matter of fit. It was never the right fit, and it always felt that way. So I had this tie to not just my mom's medicinal herb practice and all of the things that she had it was sort of putting a bug in my ear since I was a teenager, and I finally woke up and chose to actually listen to it. So that was definitely part of it. The other piece of it was, of course, my own experience with my struggles with mental and emotional health, feeling like I was really having trouble finding the right thing for me that felt like it was serving me and not hurting me. And that was the impetus for creating Good Psyche, and then eventually stepping away from my career in tech altogether. My advice for people who are thinking about stepping into either the psychedelic space or an adjacent space like the one that I'm in is to really do your research on who you're going to work with. So if you're not starting your own company and you're going to work with someone, really understand who that person is, and at a soul level, and make sure that you're aligned with them and their values. Because I think that one of the things I've observed in recent years in the psychedelic space, having gone to a number of the big conferences and talks and met with a lot of these people, is that there are a lot of people doing incredible work in psychedelics. They are pushing for the right legislation. They're pushing for access for underserved communities. They're doing amazing work. There are also people out there who are seeing this as a cash grab opportunity. Right? As with anything that you can capitalize on, that you can potentially profiteer from, there will be profiteering. And I think that that's happening as well. So that would be my advice for people. If you're going to work with someone who's already started something, just really do your due diligence and make sure that your values align with their values and what they're building. And if you're going off to do your own thing, get a therapist, have someone on call. No, but I think having a support system around you is very important, because being an entrepreneur is extremely isolating. You will work 7 days a week. You will not see your friends as much. You will miss out on a lot of things that you might have used to do. And that can be really hard to kind of push through and keep telling yourself that what you're doing is worth what you feel like you're missing, right? So that would be my advice for people who are starting their own thing. I don't mean to make it sound like it's all doom and gloom. It's exciting. It's adventurous. It's like a thrill ride, right? But if I was talking to myself 3 years ago, that's what I would want someone to tell me.
Beautifully put. There has been a lot of interest, I feel, definitely recently in Kanna, and so curious how you found the right partner to source, your particular strain and varietal from, and how that impacted your product development. And what do you think the impact will be on the future if everyone's sourcing this from South Africa? Will it be a boon to their economy? Will they get resentful at all these Westerners coming in and taking over their traditional plant medicine?
It's so delicate. I mean, so to answer your question, I did a ton of research on labs and manufacturers the people who were going to be sourcing the Kanna for us and actually formulating it with our formula and so forth. I eventually found someone who sources it from South Africa, which is where it's native to. And they grow it in the ground. It takes roughly 4 years to grow. That's the growth cycle before you can cultivate it. But it's cultivated in the Karoo region of South Africa, and it really does need to grow in that environment. So it would be interesting to see if, people who maybe live in similar sort of arid regions of the world start to try to grow Kanna to meet the demand. But right now, Kanna is not an endangered plant. The supply can meet the demand, and they have profit sharing agreements with the San and Khoi peoples of South Africa. So there's a requirement, so to speak, that the Kanna be grown by and in these regions of South Africa and be sourced from that place. As it grows in popularity, you never know what's going to happen. As I said, people might take it and start to grow it in other areas of the world, or attempt to grow it in other areas of the world. I don't know that they'd be successful. But speaking on behalf of me and Good Psyche, our intention is, of course, to continue to source it from the people who were the initial stewards of this plant to begin with. None of us would probably even know that this plant exists if it wasn't for the San and Khoi peoples who incorporated it into every aspect of their life. So, not endangered right now. Supply chain is healthy right now. We'll see what happens in the future.
Beautiful. Trish, where can people follow you? Where can they try your products? What exciting things you have in development with your brand?
Yeah. So exciting things we have in development. I think the most exciting thing right now, having just recently launched, is we are really looking for collaborations and partnerships when it comes to events. We have done a lot of sort of integrations because Kanna integrates so beautifully with meditation, sound baths, yoga, retreats. It also integrates really beautifully with, as I mentioned, traditional psychedelics like psilocybin. So we're talking with some psilocybin retreats to integrate with them. So I think it's going to be really fun to see where those sorts of events and opportunities grow. And people can find us at Seek Good Psyche on Instagram. Our website is seekgoodpsyche.com, and they can find me at Trisha Suze on Instagram.
Beautiful. Well, Trish, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. I'm excited to continue to educate our audience about Kanna, so thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.